Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where it's about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Walking Dead. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. It was actually really interesting how they went about structuring this episode. Obviously, I think they had to work around the, circumstances of what the world is going through, so I think it's had a big impact on this show's production, and I'm curious if what we're getting for this bonus episodes are kind of a key sign of a little bit of how some of the future episodes are going to be structured. And even if storyline wise they're not necessarily structured the same way, but we might be seeing, because I was even reading an article saying like, oh yeah, the Walking Dead is going to kind of be changed forever potentially, because obviously this whole situation in the world not something we're 100% done with. So, which obviously is kind of sad. We actually think about like the real world situation and just the circumstances in The Walking Dead. Not saying there are parallels to it, but I think there's some slight parallels you can draw to it, interestingly enough. No, not, I guess interesting wouldn't be the right word, but regardless. What I thought was interesting about this episode is the Gabriel and Aaron situation of like there being... At first I was thinking like, is this episode not going to have like any dialogue? That's what I was wondering, because obviously there was very little between Aaron and Gabriel. But I think that's kind of the point, because more so than anything, they're looking for supplies because of all these places on Maggie's map, and it's just that desperation of like, yep, they're trudging along, having to kill more and more walkers. I found a place, checked it, nothing there. Move on to the next place, more dead, more, just so on and so forth. Even going as far as like Aaron saying, we were gone for 2 weeks. I want to get back to my daughter. I'm sure you want to get back to yours. But it's also like, we need to do this because there's the hunting grounds nearby aren't enough. Obviously, we don't have each other to help. There's no more Hilltop. There's no more Kingdom. All that stands is kind of Alexandria and Oceanside, but obviously Oceanside doesn't have like, it's not enough of an ecosystem to kind of keep everyone good. So obviously they're backed into a corner. Obviously, like I said, Alexandria has a lot of repairs, so it's a thing of like, we need to find more out there. So it's that desperate thing of like, we have our home back home and we need to get back to. But there's also a part of me that's wondering, Gabriel is it an escape? Because yeah, when you were back home, there was a whole Whispers thing, there was a whole Dante thing, there was a whole Sadiq situation that, like, I'm sure a lot of that did not, it's still rummaging through you, so I'm sure even less reason to want to stick back home. Just constant reminders of all of that, I'm sure, and all that's kind of been lost. Having to keep going despite all that you've lost, that's kind of always been the thing in the show, and it's just like, this has been some of the roughest losses that they've sustained, like, over the course of this series, like, especially, like, so consistently they lost so many people because of the Whisperers. But obviously they're trudging along to the point that Gabriel's like, one more place, and Aaron's like, no, but Gabriel just keeps going because it's like, once again, because they don't have too many choices. What I thought was interesting too is like some of the places they checked. Like one place they came across was burned bodies, and it's like, Aaron's like, what happened here? And I think Gabriel was like, we'll never know. And I think that's the sad thing of this story. Like, there's so many walkers under certain circumstances. Like, oh, you see a walker leaning against a pole or something. It's like, you don't know that person's story. Whatever their story is, it came to an end. And you get a peek into that a little bit every once in a while. Like, you'll see pictures of someone, and it'd be like, oh, there's a whole story here that you're not being told, that you'll never know. It happens on a regular basis in this world. There's so many stories that are left untold. For every walker there is, that was someone's life that came to an end. Who knows if that person has some family out there still looking for them, or whether that person was all alone in this world. There's just so much you don't know. But what immediately made me think of was episode 17, the first episode of the bonus episodes, was when Maggie and the others came back to that place and found like one or two burned bodies. So I'm wondering, is this connected to that dude? I think his name's Pope, right? The one that was kind of in charge of them, or whatever, the one that's coming after Maggie and them for whatever reason. I'm assuming this might have something to do with that. They really didn't go into details about, so we'll kind of have to wait and see whether there end up being anything. But obviously there was also the desperation of just like, obviously Gabriel climbs up that building, and it's a whole bunch of like, there's like 2 people over here dead, and there's another person over here dead with a gun in their hand. Like, they didn't turn into walkers, but there's someone that's chained up that was turned into a walker. We don't know what that person's like. There's so much story that's like all you see is like the word written "save us." It's like at some point in time they were trapped up there, probably ran out of food and starved to death. Maybe they killed themselves or and each other just to make sure they wouldn't turn into walkers, because obviously they turn. There's that one that's either, I don't know why that one was particularly chained up. Maybe that was someone who betrayed them. Once again, that's the whole point. So many stories that you could just guess and infer about potentially, but you'll never 100% know. So they end up, trudging along, and I love that, like, Gabriel falls into some mud because of a walker, and then Aaron's laughing because I think for them it's like the first time in a long time they've laughed. And then he's helping him up and then gets covered in mud too. And it's like, well, the map's destroyed. Well, we got to go to that water tower. It was nearby. It's like, no. Let's go back. He's like, I'm not planning on going forward without a map. And Gabriel's like, all right, fine, we'll go back. We'll follow our trails back. And then immediately it starts raining. So it's like, when it rains, it pours, right? But they end up discovering another building, and they're kind of skulking it out a little bit. Gabriel finds a whole bunch of Bibles, and as a preacher, I think that resonates with him. He found some torn out papers. It's like, okay. Because whoever it was collected a whole bunch of Bibles. Obviously, he hears Aaron screaming, and it's like, well, what happened? And then Aaron's like, oh, it scared me. It came out of nowhere. And Gabriel's laughing at him. It's like, oh, that was quite a scream. He's like, these things are vicious. I'm like, you deal with walkers on a regular basis. Hey, it is an animal. You can't underestimate the fact is a wild animal will just straight up kill you. Under normal circumstances, in a world like this, you can't let your guard down thinking just because you can handle walkers, because walkers can catch you slipping and end up killing you. Same thing for an animal under these circumstances. But I just love that Gabriel was losing his shit over it. And it's like, Aaron's like, all right, go ahead, get it out. And it's like, all right, so we've got dinner, and he had found some alcohol, so let's drink. But he's like, no. Don't just, because at first Aaron's like, really? That's all you give me? He's like, no, this is rare. So smell it. What do you smell? You really get into it. Now taste it. Now it's super flavorful. Now eat is going to be that much more. And it's like, well, the fact is we've had a terrible day, so hook me up with some more. And pours a little bit. And then he's still holding his cup out. Gabriel pours him some more. So, and they kind of end up getting a little. Well, I love that they're betting. They're playing cards and everything. It's like Aaron didn't have anything else to bet. So he starts betting his drink, and then immediately he gives into Gabriel's bluff, and he's like, I'm not about to bet my drink. I love that. Like, it must be that good. But they were kind of drinking a little bit, and we kind of found out the reason why Gabriel knows so much about alcohol, well, whiskey in particular, is because he learned it all from a mentor, a friend of his, who was another, and it was kind of interesting because he was like, oh yeah, like, I think it was like the first time they had met was sadly because of a kid named Tommy who had died. He was like a freshman in college who had died of cancer. I think that in itself was kind of sad, but obviously it was about it's like, oh, he tells a story about, oh yeah, me and what was it, Pastor George or whatever, like, he's going 80 past stop signs and everything. Well, we got to get there first. Rips off his collar, rips off mine, and goes for the alcohol and has 2 cups in his hand and goes over to Tommy's dad because Tommy's dad had showed up. And it was kind of an interesting thing where it was a situation of don't talk to people about what you think they need to hear. Just kind of basically talk to them from the heart. Just say what you believe. Don't say what you think they need you to say. Just talk to them, just have that conversation. And obviously that sat with Gabriel, and even to the point everyone's like, you should go back to preaching and stuff like that, because truth be told is Gabriel hasn't really, do correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if Gabriel's really done that since he kind of got brought in. Under the circumstances of how he met the core group, like obviously the whole thing of locking his flock outside, leaving them to die. I don't know if he really had done much preaching since then. Maybe he had, and I'm probably just not remembering on the top of my head. But I think it's more so specifically because there was so much. It's the thing of Aaron also bringing up the fact is that we haven't welcomed people in a very long time because they stopped looking for people. Like, one of the last times they did that was before, with Rick. Like they've lost so much that Rick was kind of like the last backbone, because after he died, quote unquote died, obviously we know he's still alive, but to them he died, And because of that, like, they lost a little bit of that spark that kept them going. And obviously that eventually led to the issues between the different communities during the time skip and everything. So because of that, like, they haven't let people in a very long time. They've kind of grown a little mistrustworthy of people. Obviously, the Whisperer situation probably agitated that feeling even more. Because remember, like, the whole Whisper thing, Alpha was able to do what she was able to do because they had lost touch with each other. Because we weren't so as tight-knit as we used to be. We know who was in every community. Because we were so distant, Alpha was able to sneak in and just blend in without us kind of batting an eye. So it's kind of on that basis of, like, they haven't. I feel like I could be mistaken. I want to say the last person I remember them taking in might have been Sadiq. That he might be the last person I'm aware of them taking in. I guess I'm trying to remember timeline wise. Might have been some of the Oceanside stuff too. That's what clicks in my head. I feel like Sadiq might have been one of the last people. And who brought him in? Carl. So that adds more layers to that. I think they've let other people in subsequently since. Like, I think they made a point of it, but like, Carl is one of the last people to kind of hold on to that. So I think that just it puts that even more of a sting and tinge onto that. Because obviously with Gabriel, it's like, no, like, he doesn't even want to, like, preach anymore, because it's like, I think for him, he feels, what's the point? Like, he's in a very negative mood, because obviously it's like a thing, because there are bad people out there, which you had, because Gabriel's just got the mindset of just like, we don't do that anymore because, like, people aren't good, almost kind of being like, people are inherently bad under these circumstances. It's like, yeah, but we can't let who the Whisperers were cloud us, but it's like, evil people aren't the exception, they are the rule. Saying like, it's not like, oh, evil people are just every once in a while, there's just some evil people. It's like, no, they are the rule, that there are the most commonality in this world, essentially. Which circumstances take an interesting turn when some stranger pops up, and it's freaking Robert Patrick. Because I saw his name in the intro, I was like, did I just see that right? And it's like, yeah, Robert Patrick. I was like, holy crap, didn't expect these circumstances. But it's kind of holding Gabriel hostage, because apparently that was his board they were eating. Oh, and my whiskey you were drinking. It's like, well, we didn't see anyone here. We didn't know anyone was living here. It's like, oh, you thought that board locked itself in that room, got into that room by itself? But it also turns out he also has Aaron, because he found Aaron's mace. Because it's like, we don't want any trouble. We're just looking for supplies. Like, we're not here to harm you. And it's like, oh, here is Aaron's mace arm. Not here to harm people, right? Oh, you think this gun is loaded? And he's like, I don't know. A limited number of bullets in the world. He fires off a couple shots. And it's like, well, do you think he's okay? Who? Oh, your friend. He's in that room I was shooting at. And it's like, no, sit down. And eventually he brings Aaron out, because apparently he was there the entire time, so he was listening into their conversation about how Gabriel was kind of like saying, like, evil people, like how pessimistic Gabriel was, and that turns out to be this dude's whole thing. We later on find out his name is Maze, but what his whole thing is, he's trying to prove to them, like, oh, people are terrible. So it's like, hey, we're about to do a Russian roulette situation. You can point the gun at yourself or at Aaron, and vice versa. And each time, like, you know, you have to pull the trigger and decide, because it's like, well, whoever survives gets to leave. And it's like, how do we know you're just not going to kill us both at the end? It's like, you don't. So got to play the game. And it's the back and forth. And I'm like, oh, this happened, well, last week, and last week's episode of The Blacklist, to a certain extent. I was like, oh, I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. Even I was like, oh, just because these are bonus episodes don't mean they won't try, doesn't mean they can't necessarily kill someone off. So I was kind of nervous. I was like, because that's the thing with the show. This is, even though I've never seen Game of Thrones, this is very much like Game of Thrones in the sense of, like, anyone can get it at any point in time. Whether you're like, hey, you've been around for a while, you can get it surprisingly out of nowhere. Even if you've been around for a little bit, you can definitely get it really quickly. I want to say the quickest turnaround was probably Noah. What was it, back in season 5? He was around for a couple episodes and he died horribly. Yeah. So that's the thing. But regardless, so you're never 100% sure who's guaranteed to be safe, because there is no guarantees 100%. But nevertheless, I just thought that was a back and forth, and obviously they're trying to like speak to their nature and being like, people aren't that bad. Like, hey, like, he's like, I was wrong. People like even suggesting like, because at the end of the day, because he tried to get Aaron, he's like, oh, you want to see your daughter Gracie, right? So go ahead, hurry up. And before Aaron could pull the trigger, because this time it was definitely going to bully the bullet, he stopped him. He's like, this is who I am. This is who people are. But it's like, this doesn't have to be who they are. It's like, because he had told the story of his brother. It's like, I was with my brother and my family, because you want to say like, oh, we're so important to each other. We'd never turn on each other like this because we're family. But it's like, he's like, I was betrayed by my brother. Like, I was with him and his family. And then I woke up to find my brother stealing the last of our food. And, it's like in that moment he was so pissed off and disgusted by his brother. He's like, oh, I was betrayed by my family, the person. He's like, I was there. I saved his life so many countless times. And I think that right there is kind of the problem. Like, you're looking at it as like, he kind of owes me. I've saved him so many times and he has the nerve to betray me by stealing my food. It's like you were kind of keeping count. I don't think that's kind of the right mentality to have under these circumstances. But, regardless, it's, it's a, survival thing, like, whether or not, I think, we are, at the end of the day, we are animals, so that some of that natural instinct for survival kicks in. But it's also like, we had the choice kind of whether or not we give in to that, we surrender to that darkness. And that's kind of the whole point that Gabriel was trying to get across. Like, you thinking your brother taught you some life lessons. Like, no, your brother betrayed you. That's it, It's like, and you locked yourself away assuming that everyone is the same or evil, because it's a lot easier to do that than acknowledging the fact is that, hey, your brother just screwed you over and betrayed you. You're like, that's a lot harder to admit. It's easier to accept everyone's just terrible and out for themselves, rather than just admitting, like, not, because you don't want to get your hopes up and believing in people, because it's like, it's easier just to be like, nope, everyone's shitty and terrible, and but it's like, your brother didn't teach you that lesson. He betrayed you and kind of hurt you. So, but basically was able to kind of talk him down, and at that moment he's cutting him free, and it's like, no, we have our community, we'll bring you back and everything. I was like, are you really going to bring him back? So that moment, like, he's cut Aaron free, and it's like, Maze, and it's like, what? My name is Maze. I was like, I'm kind of uncomfortable, and just when I'm thinking that thought, bam, comes Gabriel, like, hitting him with the mace, and it's like, don't worry, I took care of him. No, is that where it's like, no, we're good. And then Aaron's like, are we? Because, like, we murdered this dude. But for him, it's like, this guy murdered his family, like, his brother and his brother's family. So, like, he's not a good guy. But it's still kind of like, because I think also for Aaron, it's like, because they said the thing of, we're not murderers or thieves. It's like, because also, what's your justification for murder? Have you killed people out of non-self-defense? It's kind of been that case in situations before. But it's also the thing of, at the end of the day, it's a rough situation, because they've done a lot of things that none of them are proud of. So I think that's why Aaron's like, are we really good guys at the end of the day? Like, we could have done something different, like, because I think for Aaron, it's like, this was an opportunity to kind of, and I think for him, he was actually a little hopeful of it. It's like, hey, things have changed for us. We can go back to, oh, you killed the dude. All right, let's just get out of here and go. But then it's like, wait, he heard everything we were saying. So where was he hiding this entire time? So they go up to, like, the attic area, and lo and behold, they find his brother, his twin brother, along with 2 dead bodies. So it's like, that's his family. So he didn't kill his brother. He kept his brother alive, just kind of punish him. But he was like, he made me play the game. He made me play it. And it's like, he survived it, and his brother didn't let him go, because it's like, oh, live with the fact is that you're alive and your family's dead. This is what happened because you betrayed me. This is the lesson you've taught me, type of thing. But, it's like, hey, we'll get you out of here. We're only here to help you. But he grabs Gabriel's gun. He's like, help, and just looks at his family, because it's like, he'd given up hope. It's like, and pulls the trigger. And I think that's the most depressing. Like, this was a bummer of an episode, because it's like, well, okay, so I guess we're not, we want to pretend like we're good, but we're willing to kill a guy. It's like, to be fair, he was holding us hostage and making us try and kill each other. But even Gabriel's defense being like, no, he killed his own family. I mean, yeah, the guy was a little crazy. So, but I mean, to be fair, there's also that aspect of, like, because I think you also have to remember what Gabriel did to Dante. I think that in itself speaks volumes of just kind of what happened to him, that, like, enough time passes that it kind of corrupts your soul. Because it even talked about the fact is wasn't reading the Bible. He believed it was all kind of crap. He read them back and forth and he believed it was all crap. So that's why he used the pages as toilet paper. Easier to find Bibles than anything else. So, but Gabriel's kind of gotten, I think everyone's gotten a little darkened under these circumstances. And what makes it even worse is after that whole thing goes down, what does Gabriel do? Pick up the gun. Can't let that gun go to waste. Checking the food, and you see the look on Aaron's face, just kind of like, let's just get out of here. And so when it's time for them to leave, and it's like, oh, there's the tower. It's like, and then, it's like, what do you want to do? And Aaron's like, one more. It's just kind of like, it's a sad thing of like, despite what they just went through, what they experienced, it's like, let's keep going. It's, it's the sad, process of survival. Like, how much it kind of wears you down, what you see and what you experience and what you go through, and just trudging along and surviving. Because, it's like, well, after, it's still the thing of we got family and people to take care of going forward, despite what our circumstances are. Gracie and them, it's like, well, fine, maybe we'll find something at the water tower, maybe not, but it's one more place, let's do it. Like, we've been out here, can't kind of go home 100% empty-handed. It's like, like I said, it's an interesting and complicated process of just despite everything, the terrible shit you've seen and experienced, it's just kind of like I think, like I said, I think the message of it just being the sad thing of them keep going forward, and it's just like, that's always the thing, because that was a big part of the conversation too, is like Aaron believing that things could go bad, which obviously for Gabriel, there's no going back. The way the world is now, there's no reforming it back to the original way, because even if you try to, it eventually break down. Obviously, that was a whole conversation too about last episode about am I thinking about last episode, or I'm thinking about Fear of the Walking Dead, with the whole conversation about there's no point that like every community. Oh, it might have been last week's about like the whole thing, like no matter what community you try to build, it's all just going to fall apart anyway. That was the conversation between that was last week's episode about between Carol and Daryl about like what happened to Alexandria. Like it will happen if they try to build another place too, that eventually like nothing's going to last in this world. So it's kind of a similar conversation. Like I said, everyone's downtrodden, everyone's just kind of hopeless at this point in time, and they're trying to find that hope, that's, like I said, that spark of light in this darkness. Like, yeah, they won the war, but like I said, so much was lost along the way, and it's like, even with those little sparks coming here and there, it just feels like it's not enough to light the way completely, So, because even though Maggie and her pals came up seeming like they're the spark helping with the whole Whisperers thing, even they have come with their own personal shrouds of darkness too. So just a lot of interesting stuff in this episode. I thought it was really, really interesting. So I'm really curious to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.